What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? I'm a little bit late to the party, but today I'm going to give you my 2 pence about the new Afghanistan map, which I have been thoroughly enjoying, although I have to say it's got some drawbacks. Mainly is the fact that it's just unfinished, and I know a lot of you have brought that up already with me, that, you know, the map just doesn't look that great in a lot of places, and that is very true, and I totally agree with you. That is the biggest downside. So I would say if you're somebody who's expecting to fly large distances between places, low level, and you're expecting a very, very, very high level of detail, you probably will come across a fair few areas in its current state where it isn't that great, and it's just totally unfinished, and in some places it actually just sucks. So some places, the mountains, the textures don't look great, and they're quite low resolution, and that is very true. I am going to agree with you. It is early access. Now, normally I am the first person to criticize map makers for doing a rubbish job and then basically slapping on the early access at the end of the title and calling it a day, and, you know, basically making it acceptable, if you will, for us to purchase a product which is completely unfinished or misadvertised. Now, I have voiced my concerns about the Cola map multiple times before, and I believe that to be completely misrepresentative to what I think we should have been getting. I think it's unacceptable, but this map, I wouldn't say that. This map, I think, is great because the areas which are finished, and I absolutely do admit that it's in clusters. The clusters of areas which are finished look phenomenal, and in between it kind of is a bit meh, needs a lot of work. Absolutely, totally agree. However, for early access, I think this is more than acceptable. First of all the bases are there. Well, not all the bases, but at least all the main bases are there. Definitely would be good to see some more forward operating bases, which we currently don't have in the game. But for the bigger bases which are there, they're pretty much ready to go. Yeah, they've got some anomalies and, you know, probably gonna have some improvements over time, but overall you'd be totally happy. It's a lot of eye candy. It looks great. It looks super realistic. You could operate out of there, all sorts of different kind of cast missions, as you might imagine, over Afghanistan. Some areas, like I say, around the map aren't great, but the clusters which are finished are phenomenal, and I mean literally phenomenal. For me, the highest, most cohesive, best looking map of all time. And before this I would have said, you know, the Syria map's probably the best one we have, not counting, say, the Caucasus, just because it looks so lush and green and pretty, but just in terms of level of detail, buildings, all that kind of stuff, I would say it's always been Syria for me. This blows Syria out the water. This is basically like the Marianas Islands map, which is great, but also just very small, just a couple islands, and plus, you know, not much action happened there anyway, apart from World War II. So, you know, it's one of those kind of oddball maps that wasn't all that useful unless you did some oddball stuff with it. The Afghanistan map, I have to say, they've clearly used the same technology, and I am almost certain that the same people have done both maps, because not only have they reused some of the objects, which, by the way, is not an insult in any way, because I think they've done a phenomenal job here, but also the great thing about it is the attention to detail. The attention to detail is phenomenal. You have like fruit stalls, and you have all these little clusters of clutter and, you know, stuff, just crap lying around, you know, broken down cars and stuff that's burnt or whatever. Anyway, all these. Honestly, if you put yourself into some of these streets of first-person view, you'd think that you were in some kind of first-person shooter. I mean, absolutely phenomenal what they've done, so absolutely love it. Now, gotta warn anybody who's, you know, interested in buying the map, yeah, there's a lot of areas which are unfinished, and I mean a lot of areas. So, if you are buying it, honestly, you should have the mindset that, you know what, you're gonna have to base your missions around some little clusters of towns and cities, and perhaps not, you know, like I say, covering large distances. High altitude looks great. Mountains in a lot of places suck. Pretty low resolution. However, if they keep improving the map with the same level of detail that they currently have in the finished areas, I think it's going to be phenomenal. One constructive criticism I would have for ED, and this really goes for kind of any map, but especially something as large as Afghanistan, it would be great for us to have a simple overlay in the mission editor to show us which parts are finished, which are maybe kind of work in progress, and which haven't even been touched. You know, so kind of like a green for you know, an area that's done, amber for an area that's kind of still work in progress, red for, you know, something that they haven't even just basically slapped on the bare minimum of low-res textures on there. Because for us mission makers, you know, would be a lot easier for us to see on the map where the high level of detail areas are, as opposed to constantly load up the mission in about 10 different or 100 million places and then figure it out for ourselves. Now, another thing I would love to see, and I've not really heard many people talk about it, but I'm kind of amazed, is I would love to see a version of this map, and I don't think it would be very difficult for ED to do that, but a version of this map that's based on the 1980s. So as a lot of you probably know, the Soviet Union was heavily involved in a fight against the Mujahideen between 1979 and 1989. I mean, what a great opportunity to do so. And it wouldn't really be very difficult for ED to do that anyway. They would just have to change the bases mostly. They wouldn't really have to change much of the towns because it all looks pretty much the same, I think. But, you know, so long as they could erase some of the current modern American bases and, you know, create some of the Soviet ones. Some of which I believe are not even on the Afghan territory anyway, but they would be within the current planned area of the map. So comment down below if you think that would be a good idea. I mean, I just think it's criminal to not do it, because, you know, we want to use the Su-25 and the Mi-28 and, you know, whatever other airplanes come out in the future, you know, MiG-23s, MiG-21s and whatnot. So yeah, I think it would be criminal to not include a Soviet 1980s version of the Afghanistan map, because I think it would be, relatively speaking, not a huge amount of work for Eagle Dynamics. Before I go, I just want to mention one last thing. I didn't really mention performance. I will say, relative to other maps, I think some areas are on the heavy side, especially where trees are involved. Buildings, for some reason, a lot of buildings and clutter, especially in the middle of a big town or something, not really an issue, but wherever there's a lot of trees, and they have a lot of trees here despite the fact that there's no real forests, but there is a lot of trees and they really do bring performance down. Maybe that's something they can improvise on, or improve on rather, and optimize for the future, but otherwise there is a chance you might just have to turn your graphic settings, or maybe your shadows just down a touch, to get the kind of level of performance maybe that you're used to on the Syria map. But of course that is only if you're flying very low level, and like I say, in these areas where there's a fair amount of trees involved. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed that overview. Comment down below with your thoughts and feelings, but otherwise hopefully I'll catch you in the next video. Adios.